from these so-called 4 cases. And we have tried to establish different dynamics and factors that will try to revert as a main outcome to an academic paper that later on my colleagues will discuss all that. As cross-cutting analytical variable, we would like to analyze, which has been the gender dimension of the truth commissions, looking on whether gender and women's rights were included in the mandate, and where to make special references in a so special day of today, 25 November, International Day on Violence Against Women. More concretely, this seminar is having 3 main objectives: to discuss the imbalances between power, between international and national actors, and the victims, local NGOs in the design and development of truth commissions. The debate the margins of maneuver of civil society to shape the process of knowledge, production, politics knowledge in the context of the design and development, and to analyze how grassroots interactions with official truth-seeking mechanism open to spaces to distribute power in the context of transition. To do it so, we have designed a 2 roundtable seminar. The first one, which is being called Power Dynamics in Knowledge Production During Transitional Justice Processes, will be moderated by Ana Isabel Rodriguez from Global Code Research Group, and we have 2 main intervenants, Carlos Fernandez Tourné and Adou Janedi Fatou-Gomin, from the centers from Global Codes and Centre Suisse de Recherche Scientifique, respectively. After a short break, we'll have at around 3:45 a second roundtable called Local Ownership in the Right to Truth, whose knowledge, what knowledge in Colombia, which will be finally moderated by Silvia Planas, from International Catalan Institute for Peace, who will be finally replacing Christian Herbolzheimer. And we'll have 2 representatives, 2 speakers on this second roundtable: Ana María Linares Soto from Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and Michelle Hart from the Macro Territorial Internacional from Colombia. In the end, and around 5:15, concluding remarks by Oscar Mateos from Global Codes will be conducted. Just to let you know that the 2 roundtable seminars will be conducted as a sort of dialogue. Moderator will be asking several questions to our speakers. We have also have some specific row 0 representative, or we try to call in order to tell them to attend this seminar. But for sure, you as a spectators, you have the Q&A moderation and the possibility to ask any questions you may need. We are all of us trying to be strict on time, knowing how hard sometimes is having these online seminars. So for that, we would like to have this time to have it all. If with no longer prolongation, I'd like to give the floor to the moderator of the first roundtable, Ana Isabel Rodríguez Iglesias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Albert, and welcome all to this international seminar. Let's start now the panel, Power Dynamics in Knowledge Production During Transitional Justice Processes. So first of all, I would like to welcome our 2 panelists. In the first place, Mr. Adou Janedi. He is the head of the research group Governance, Society and Economic Development, and at the Centre Suisse de Recherche Scientifique in Abidjan. Mr. Adou Janedi holds a PhD in sociology from the Félix Houphouët-Boigny University of Abidjan from 2013, and in 2014, he joined the international project on resistance to transitional justice as a researcher for the case of Côte d'Ivoire, funded by the Swiss National Fund and led by the Centre Suisse and Swiss Peace. He was awarded with the Swiss Excellence Scholarship for Foreign Scholars as a postdoc researcher at Swiss Peace at the University of Basel. Since 2018, he has been the Policy and Public Engagement Coordinator of Afrique One Aspire for West Africa. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation to participate.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
And now I would like also to introduce you to Carlos Fernandez, who is one of the research members of the project What Truth, and also a member of the research group Global Codes. Carla Fernandez is an associate professor of international public law, international relations, human rights, and transitional justice at the Blanquerna School of International Relations at the University of Ramon Llull. He's also a consultant on human rights and transitional justice issues. He has worked for several years as a human rights officer with international NGOs and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Nepal from 2008 to 2012. And since 2017, he has held various positions within the United Nations, researching how transitional justice contributes to the prevention of violations, both as a consultant and staff with the Office for the Prevention of Genocide. Academically, he has conducted research at the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice, New York University School of Law, and at the Institute of Peace and Unification Studies at Seoul National University. And since 2015, Carlos has been the convener of the European Consortium for Political Research Group on Human Rights and Transitional Justice. Thank you also, Carlos, for your participation.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Okay, so before giving the floor to the two of you, I would like to briefly mention a little bit of our paper, of the research that we have been conducting during the last year, also to situate the audience. So we started with the research question: to what extent victims and civil society have been able to shape the process of knowledge production of the truth commissions established in Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, Nepal, and Colombia, particularly in the process leading to their establishment and in the interactions during the implementation of the mandate. So we draw from Jones and Liu, and we understand the politics of knowledge production as this process by which knowledge comes to be regarded as such, a process of defining what counts as knowledge. And we understand that this process encapsulates power relations between different epistemic actors and the structures in which they operate. So in this vein, in our paper, we argue that knowledge production is a relational process in which linear results cannot be expected, and rather the outcomes always depend on different dynamics and factors that interact during the design and implementation of the process. So by examining these processes, we aim to provide a framework of analysis of the imbalances of power ever existing in any transitional justice mechanism, and in particular within truth-telling processes. So the framework proposed identifies three dynamics that I would like to briefly mention and also use for our debate today. So the first one looks into the deconstruction of the normative and discursive evolution of the global norms of transitional justice, particularly the right to truth and the promotion of victims' participation consultations, and how then these precepts condition the establishment of truth commissions. The second dynamic looks or studies how the global norm is then materialized through the establishment of a truth commission in terms of the design of the mandate, the space offered or won by the civil society, the duration of the mandate, the composition of the commission, etc. And third, the third dynamic explores how the implementation of the Truth Commission is negotiated at the micro level with civil society, looking at the existing and resulting hierarchies of power within civil society and their previous record of collective action. So with these three dynamics in mind, I would like now to invite the two panelists to respond to some questions that may help to understand better the dynamics of power, the power of knowledge production during the Truth Commissions established in Nepal and Côte d'Ivoire. So, Carlas, regarding the first dynamic, and starting with you first, in a nutshell, what would you say that are the main hallmarks in the evolution of the normative discourse of transitional justice? And from that, what are the main points that that normative essence of transitional justice have affected the context in which the Truth Commission in Nepal was established?
Okay, so let me maybe just start by talking about these main hallmarks, no, in the evolution of the normative discourse of transitional justice. I think it's important to realize the starting point, and the starting point is impunity. That had been the norm. That had been the way that things have usually gone. There was an armed conflict. There was an end of an authoritarian regime. Suddenly, there was a change. There was no punishment. There could be punishment in terms of a victor's justice, if we think about Nuremberg, for example. But in terms of an internal situation of change, let's say that that's the starting point. Now, we think about Latin America and the democratizations, the human rights violations that happened there, especially with enforced disappearances, and those democratizations as a beginning in which we have an Inter-American Court, we have an Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, where they start basically pointing towards issues such as recognizing a collective right to truth, talking about the rights of society to know the truth about circumstances in which crimes were committed. We have a Human Rights Committee or International Court of Human Rights recognizing the right of the families to know what happened to their family members, the duty of the states to investigate, to inform. All this starts creating these rights, this possibility that victims are entitled to. I think it's quite telling the way that a group of scholars in 1986 put it in a compilation of an analysis that they had done about transitions in Southern Europe and also in Latin America, where they said that, where the authors argued that instead of burying a recent past of human rights violations, reinforcing the sense of impunity, the new regime should muster the political and personal courage to impose judgment upon those accused of gross violations of human rights. This was O'Donnell, Schmidt. I think they were pointed here to the core of what came to be known as transitional justice. What justice measures need to be taken during a transitional period. So at the end, in the 90s, we think about obviously the end of the Cold War, the 1993 World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, which adopted a declaration on program of action, which was later endorsed by the General Assembly. Basically, the Vienna Declaration called on the states to abrogate legislation that led to impunity for those responsible of grave violations of human rights. And also, importantly, the creation of a Commission on Human Rights to examine issues of impunity. Now, when we think about this Commission on Human Rights, in 1997, it came back with a report, the Jonet Principles, where basically it talked about a set of principles to protect and to promote human rights through action to end impunity. That's the first time of a UN policy document where we find explicitly the rights of victims to truth, to justice, to reparations, as well as measures to avoid repetition. That's in 1997. But in parallel to that, at the same time that this was ongoing, we had the establishment of the South African Truth Commission, which basically the model that brought was basically let's say truth, an amnesty, a conditioned amnesty in exchange for truth. So in 1998, we have the approval of the Statute of International Criminal Court. So we have these two dynamics at the same time. that leads to this explanation of basically a truth versus justice at the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000. There were heated debates about Human Rights Watch, for example, other human rights organizations strongly criticizing the role of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, precisely for providing amnesty, conditioned amnesty, but nonetheless an amnesty to perpetrators of human rights violations. In 2004, the UN Secretary General released the 2000 report on where basically it for the first time gave a definition of transitional justice as a full range of processes and mechanisms associated with a society attempts to come to terms with a legacy of large-scale past abuses to ensure accountability, serve justice, achieve reconciliation. And in parallel, we have the promotion of the right to truth. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights leads this study on the right to truth, where basically it is defined as an imprescriptible right to know the truth, irrespective of any legal proceedings, either if those legal proceedings are there or not. That is an autonomous right, non-derogable, of victims, of society. And I think we moved slowly towards this, from this truth versus justice. We moved towards this truth and justice. It's not one or the other. It's basically. I mean, they are not incompatible. They have to be. And at that time, maybe the debate shifts a bit into this. Not anymore truth versus justice, but more like peace versus justice. So the idea that if you are going to prosecute those who have to sign a peace agreement, why are they going to sign it in the first place? So if you are not going to provide amnesties to give, then what is what is the point of signing a peace agreement? And I remember at that time working with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Nepal, where there was this memo circulated talking about not anymore about peace versus justice, but more like peace through justice. So it will be a peace through justice. I think that debate of peace through justice is a debate that is ongoing. Is not something, it wanted to be something already resolved at that time. I don't think it was resolved at that time. I think maybe it's we can see very recently the ICC has backed Colombia transitional justice model. This is very, very recent. There is another panel afterwards which is going to be dealing with Colombia, so I don't want to get much into that. Just to say that it is maybe the first time that the ICC supports a country like Colombia, which is undertaking a transitional justice process in which it is giving 5 to 8 years of prison to perpetrators who have committed war crimes, but those years, let's say, is reducing from whatever 2025 to 5 to 8, which could be taken in a non-prison setting. Well, I think this very recent development, it's important to feel it here, because we are still dealing with this peace versus justice, and I think that the case of Colombia, which we'll discuss thoroughly afterwards, has been a new step, a new lead towards this solution, and that is still ongoing. So sorry, I don't know if I've been a bit too long, but I would leave it there. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for giving us all this panorama of the evolution of the transitional justice norm. As you just mentioned, the case of Colombia is like the last case that is kind of shaping the process still, right? Because this is a conversation that is ongoing. And that's why we understand that how the international context in a given moment is approaching the topic of transitional justice has an impact on the design and implementation of a truth commission in a particular country. And as you just briefly to ask, I wanted to just to ask you briefly, what was the context in the case of Nepal? How this international normative essence kind of influenced the design of the transitional justice in Nepal, and if it at all, right? Because maybe in some countries they just kind of circumvent the international norms. So if you could give us a few details about how it was, how this debate, the international debate, influenced the establishment of the Truth Commission in Nepal, it would be great. And then we can move to the case of Cote d'Ivoire as well.
Yeah, well, in Nepal, which precisely it's 15 years, 21st of November, since the signing of the peace agreement. It was 4 days ago, it was 15 years since the signing of the peace agreement. It was established in the peace agreement the need to contain a commitment to investigate the truth about people who have violated human rights and involved in crimes against humanity. That's incorporated in the same comprehensive peace agreement. Now, the question is that at the time, the whole process in Nepal, I think, was in a way taken by this peace versus justice, by these prosecutions, amnesties or prosecutions, that in a way has impacted the whole peace process, the whole process, transitional justice process since the beginning. That the idea was to have this truth and justice. That was at the moment, 2006, 2007, at the moment that all this was done. That was at the time, at the international level, the idea. On the other hand, the example of the South African TRC, which was the one that those signing the agreement and the government wanted to implement in Nepal, to put a commission which had the power to grant amnesties, that we could see perfectly in this case that contradiction. So the whole process, and maybe we'll take later about more in terms of the origin of the commission and this, but the whole process was sort of kidnapped in a way by this duality.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's now move to the case of Cote d'Ivoire. Mr. Dujanet, I would like also to ask you how this, or to what extent this all normative discourse of transitional justice in the global stage affected the establishment of the Truth Commission in Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you, and thank you, Carles, for this overview on the evolution of transitional justice concept. So that, coming to the case of Cote d'Ivoire, I would like just to let you know that the transitional justice process was put in place after a civil war, after a civil war, after the post-election in Cote d'Ivoire. In this context, you have 2 or 3 actors. So the winners of this post-election war, and the defeated part, and you have also the international actors, because they were there before the war, I would like, and represented by the UNOC, the UN organization operation in Cote d'Ivoire. So, so when the government decided to set up a transitional justice process, it is like a concept that was very new for them, and they are backed and pushed by the UN, and especially the human rights Commission of the United Nations, when they tried to give them the standards, to push them, and there was here within the UNOC a section of transitional justice to try to guide them. And as you might know, it was like the discourse was like the transitional justice is a tool to legitimate the new power of those who won the war. And also, as the state signed the Roma agreement of ICC. So you have, for example, the Truth Commission that is very well known, but beside this Truth Commission, you have also institutional bodies were set up so that to carry this global transitional justice process. And they try, it is like a hybrid process. They try to comply with the UN standards because as you might know, to win this war, the UN operation here in Cote d'Ivoire was like an ally of those who won the war. And for them, it is like normal to satisfy some demand from the United Nations, and especially concerning the Truth Commission. So, but at the same time, they try to control this Truth Commission so that it was set like a institutional public state institutional body with a decree. They take a decree to nominate the staff. For example, the head of the Truth Commission is like he has the rank of what we say here, the president of state institution with the advantages and so on. But at the same time, is under the power or the authority of the president. It is also with these tools that the head of state choose to appoint all the staff members. So they try to work like ordinary state institution, yes, but it was new for them, and they have to the accountability to, for example, to work with the civil society. It is not like their first interest. It is like when the state or the head of state appointed you for a certain work or position, you have to give back. You have to refer to him for what you are doing. So this is very important for those who are not familiar with the context of Cote d'Ivoire. Yeah, and it is not like in Togo or in Congo, where the Truth Commission were very free from the executive power. And this was very important. As you might know, the functioning of the Truth Commission lead to what you can everybody with whether the state side or the opposition side or the civil society, they see it like a failure. They fail to attain the expected results or goals of assigned to the Truth Commission. So because it is like an instrument or a tool to conserve the state power. And when the functioning of the global transitional justice process, for example, the judiciary process of this transitional justice. For example, you see the involvement of the ICC. The ICC, it is like they try to those who are sent to ICC were only from the opposition side. For example, as you might know, Laurent Gbagbo himself and his Ministry of Youth at the time. Also in Cote d'Ivoire, the work of the judiciary aspect, it was only from this side that people were convinced and said some of them are still in prison. The military who supported Laurent Gbagbo. So I would like to say that the process here, the Truth Commission, it is like a hybrid process. As Anna said, they try to circumvent the core standard of the UN Transitional Justice. Yes, so they try to, how to say it, to have the legitimacy from the international actors, because some aid or policy depend on how you try to deal with the transitional justice process. So they try to do it, and at the same time they use it like to ostracize their opponent here. And you can see after, for example, the head of the Truth Commission were ostracized at the end of the process. For those who are very familiar with the context of Cote d'Ivoire. So yes, they try to apply the standards as Kat says, but at the same time, they use it to enforce their power and to ostracize their opinion. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Janet. You touch upon a point that I think is very important, which is where a Truth Commission emanates from, right? And in the case of Cote d'Ivoire, as you explained, it was a political decision of a new government recently elected, and he had the capacity to impose, let's say, the president of the Truth Commission, to choose the members of the Truth Commission. And of course, the whole process is kind of polluted from this political influence, right? And I understand that for the victims, and as we will debate in a moment, was not seen as a legitimate institution or mechanism to deal with both sides of the conflict, right? I would like to stop it here now. We will come back and explore a little bit more the role of civil society in Cote d'Ivoire, but just because you introduced this important aspect of the analysis, I would like now to switch to Carlos and ask you, Carlos, as well as Mr. Janet was telling us, if you could give us also a little bit of context of where the Truth Commission in Nepal emanates from, because this is going to give us a little bit of more information about the mandate and the spirit of the Truth Commission itself. Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah, so the Truth Commission in Nepal is the result that I was saying before of the comprehensive peace agreement. That was a peace agreement signed between the Maoists, the CPN, the armed guerrilla group that had staged a war from 1996 to 2006, and on the other hand, the government of Nepal. So that peace agreement that put an end to this 10-year-old armed conflict basically set the stage for the establishment of a Truth Commission. Now, this Truth Commission is only established in 2015. So that means that that's like 9 years after the signing of the peace agreement, which tells that the parts commit themselves to establish a Truth Commission. So one has to realize that this why this happened, why there is this 9-year gap. No, on the one hand, I think it's precisely because of this peace versus justice. Is this the idea? We have to think that the UN, and particularly OHCHR, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, at that time had the presence, maybe the largest presence in a country, in a field office. That moment, the idea was basically prosecutions should take place. Yes, that was the idea. So in 2007 already there start to be some consultations. Civil society in Nepal as well, local civil society are very pro prosecutions, so in favor of those prosecutions taking place. And I think that duality between this international and UN, OHCHR, as well as national, local human rights NGOs, strong push for prosecutions, finds on the other side a government which goes alternating. Initially, the Maoists in 2008 win the elections. The guerrilla group becomes a political power that becomes the ruling party in the government. The king is basically finished, abolished. Nepal is not anymore a kingdom; it becomes a republic. So, in all these changes, the idea from civil society, from the international community, is always to have those cases against perpetrators filed, and not to use the commission as a pretext to incorporate an amnesty. On the other hand, you have a government which goes alternating from one party to the other. 2009, the Maoists leave the government because of some issues. Either way, the one that will come, even if it's Nepali Congress or the one that will continue, they always had the other idea, which is we want a process which leads to the possibility of having an amnesty, of having a pardon, so that here nobody is basically sent to jail. I think that duality, I think that carries on along with this process, and that in 2012 the OHCHR, the government decides not to renew the mandate of OHCHR in the country, and it's in 2012 when the government puts forward an ordinance which basically incorporates a possibility of providing an amnesty for perpetrators. That ordinance with that amnesty will be afterwards passed into law with some changes, but almost like the essence, in 2014. Now, it's important to say that the Supreme Court in Nepal struck down those provisions, saying that with regards to the norms, treaties, human rights, international law, Nepal is not in a position to have a law that provides for the possibility of providing amnesty for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and gross violations of human rights. So suddenly the Supreme Court in Nepal also reinforces that message. There is no possibility of an amnesty. Still, the law is passed, and the Supreme Court afterwards in 2015 will say the same, and therefore we will have a law, an act that establishes both, because that's an important detail that I didn't mention, is that we have two different bodies. We have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and a Commission of Investigation of Disappearances. Yeah, a Commission of Inquiry to look into disappearances. Two separate commissions. So this act incorporates this amnesty, even though the Supreme Court has said that is not compliant with international obligations. That law, and then we have the whole ingredients for a catastrophe, which is, on the one hand, a government wanting to promote a commission with an amnesty, civil society and international human rights community saying, no way, that's not going to happen, that cannot happen. The UN saying, we have a policy on amnesties, we do not recognize the possibility of amnesties for war crimes against humanity, so we will not support this process. This process is basically over for us, and victims whom, after all the years, well, have something to hold onto, and therefore these commissions, the Truth Commission receives about 60,000 complaints from victims, and the Commission of Inquiry on Disappearances around 3,000 complaints from cases. Well, as I said, a commission not supported neither internally by national human rights organizations, neither internationally by international NGOs, neither by the United Nations. We have like a process which starts like very, very, very poorly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carlos. You also introduced us the new element I would like to touch upon now. We have, between the two of you, you have given us a context of how the Truth Commission was imagined, or it came from, what were the main international aspects that influenced the process. And now I would like to switch to the local realm. As we mentioned at the beginning, we are exploring in this panel what role has the civil society and what margin of maneuver has in order to influence the process of knowledge production, right? Supposedly the general norm, or the global norm on transitional justice, talks about the importance of including victims' participation, and to conduct victims' consultations, etc. But let's now go a little bit deeply into that. To what extent these kind of recommendations are then taken into account on the ground, and if those are only just co-option strategies by the government or even the United Nations, or do they represent an emancipatory way for victims and civil society to really make a point, to really make their voices heard during these truth-telling processes? So, Mr. Janet, I would like to now start with the case of Côte d'Ivoire. We see that in your country, civil society has had a limited participation in the truth-telling process. And I would like to ask you, what factors may influence these? Why the civil society has not had enough capacity, agency, or willingness to shape the process? And also, you could give us a little bit of the context, to what extent this commission led by the government, right, gave them like a little bit of a space or not at all. Could you give us a little bit more of context on the participation of civil society? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I would like to say that when we try to evaluate the process and the participation of civil society in the process of transitional justice, especially in the Truth Commission work, we come with, after a workshop with all the actors, the civil society actors that we invited, and the representative of the Truth Commission at the time. And we come to the fact that the doors of the Truth Commission was closed to civil society. That was obvious. And the civil society said that the cooperation or collaboration with the Truth Commission was very, very, very limited. Very limited. And I can say that, for example, the International Transitional Justice, ICTJ, try, for example, to push the civil society so that the voice can be heard. And they try also to organize the civil society so that to give them the opportunity to get their voice heard. But I can say that it was very, very, very limited. So this has this origin on how the political space is shaped from the independence to date. Because the country has more than 30 years of unique party system. In this period, the civil society is like only related to the ruling party. So that, and after the how to say it, the democracy in 1990, even the space were open, but civil society continued to be like a support of whether the ruling party or the opposition party. So they don't see them like neutral or only want to work for, what you can say broadly, for the population or the citizen. I think this is the real reason that they put the civil society aside from the process. And yeah, but for example, the victim were not involved as such in the process, even if at the end, when they put, after the work of the Truth Commission, another institutional body was set up by the government to deal with the victim compensation. So they try to involve, but was very limited, the victim association. And these victims were organized or pushed by the international NGOs, like, as I mentioned earlier, ICTJ or others. So it is the main reason, but things are going, changing, but with a slow space, because the international partners of the state try to shape the civil society actors here. For example, for accountability, for how to follow up the fund that these partners give to the state, and how the civil society can be, for example, actors in general to the accountability in managing these funds. So we can regret it, but the fact is that the Truth Commission here in the transitional justice process, the civil society were not involved as such. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Janet, for giving us a little bit more of context of this limited participation of civil society, only just as testimonies, right, of the truth-telling process. I wonder if the civil society are being conducting or leading their own processes, their own truth-telling processes, or any other alternative way of looking for truth in their local communities or in their specific regions, etc. I don't know if you could also touch upon that element.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Anna. Yes, when we conducted a study to see the alternative way of transitional justice that people develop besides the state transitional justice or Truth Commission aspect. Yeah, at the grassroots level, the communities try to deal with this past with the standard that they own, they have in the tradition. For example, they use what we call here the ethnic alliances. Like, for example, if you have Guro ethnicity, is a group ethnicity group here, and Senufo ethnicity, they have a sort of alliance, so that, for example, if you have a conflict between Guro and Senufo, it is like they can deal with, because in their cultural aspect, it is like they have a non-aggression agreement. It is verbal, but it is like you can hurt someone from this ethnic group. So they use this mechanism so that to say, okay, it's happened, but we have to go beyond that, because our alliance still is between you and us. So they try at grass level, at the communities level, to deal with, because they know that they have to continue, they might continue to live together. So, and also, for example, the youth organization try to see how political parties with a certain part of the country or a region, they try to manage to see, okay, how we can do so that we can reproduce what happened in the past in the conflict. So this initiative exists. We see also the religions, the head of religions, they try also to manage their, but they are co-religion, we say in French, co-religionnaire. Yeah, they try also to say, okay, you have to behave like this and to accept those who come from other communities and so on. So for example, when we take the example of Jokwe, who is very important, they have worse atrocities. There's mass grave are still there, but they try to live together now and with many communities. But this process is at local level. It is at local level, and I can say that it exists. And but there is no justice aspect with this initiative. They try to solve this as like a local agreement, non-aggression agreement, how to we must manage to live together again, and this aspect, but they don't deal with the truth commission as such. So to say, okay, you wrong, you did it, that you were the perpetrator and you were victim. No. Yes, it is what I would like to say regarding your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jane. Maybe we can touch upon a few of the aspects you mentioned now regarding these alternative ways of seeking justice, peace, and community restoration and reconciliation, right? And maybe for the Q&A, we can leave that open, because now, for the sake of time, I would like to switch back to the case of Nepal. Also go a little bit deeper in the dimension of the civil society mobilization for the Truth Commission. I want to take advantage that we have among us in the audience the presence of Nirayan Tapalija, who is currently the director of Amnesty International in Nepal. Nirayan, welcome. And I want to thank you as well for taking a few questions, as we agreed before, on the case of civil society in Nepal. And from the role you have right now in Amnesty International, I would like to ask you if you could give us just a brief description of what is the current status of the work of the Truth Commission in Nepal. And then I will also ask you about the role of civil society is taking right now. Thank you, Mr. Tapalija.
Thank you, Anna, for having me here. It's very kind of you to have me here. I'm really thankful and privileged, I think, to be speaking to this august audience. I think Carlos has very precisely captured the failure of the transitional justice process in Nepal that began from the peace process in Nepal since 2006. Sorry, do you still hear me?
We got you back. We missed you for a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So, you know, I mean, what I would like to say, the justice process in Nepal is, you know, kind of a, what we call the travesty of justice. For the war crimes, crimes against humanity, you know, the serious violations of human rights that took place during conflict. The peace process that Carlos talked about had three components, fundamentally. The first one was about the demobilization, reintegration of the Maoist combatants. The second was the constitution drafting. And the third was the justice process, the delivery of truth and justice to the victims of the conflict. The political forces were quite committed on the two components of the peace process: the comprehensive peace agreement on the integration of the Maoist armies and their demobilization, but also in the process of the constitution drafting, although the Constituent Assembly has to be elected twice. Finally, in 2015, they were able to have the constitution that kind of firmly federalized Nepal for the first time. But the process of justice had been delayed. In the words of victims, it has been delayed, diluted. That way, it's been, and ultimately, it appears the state is denying the justice process. So it kind of, from the victim's perspective, it has been a ploy to delay, then dilute, and ultimately to deny the justice process. I would slightly differ, Carlos, on his stance that the civil society in Nepal had fundamentally been pro-prosecution. I would argue that the civil society, yes, they did advocate on prosecution, but the main thrust was to have a law that was compliant with international standards, which would establish the truth commissions, the commissions that we are talking about, and then would uncover truths, which would then lead to prosecution. So a good law, I mean, advocating for a good law to establish truth commissions would not necessarily mean that the civil society in Nepal were pro-prosecution. The main thrust of the civil society advocates here had ever since been this discourse began was for a strong law for the truth commissions. And as you see, like we're trying to have a good law, but then we have the worst law, perhaps in the world. So the Supreme Court in 2015, as Carlos has already mentioned, clearly directed the government to amend the law and then to bring the victims and civil society and the international community in confidence before the appointment of the commissioners, before the government actually initiated the process of the commission's formation. Unfortunately, the government did not heed the verdict of the Supreme Court, and it went ahead in its own way. I would also like to bring it here that, at the moment, the political forces, like those who were fighting each other during the conflict, are now together. They are in the same platform. They are the ones who are enjoying the power. Now there's no longer any sense of enmity. Rather, there's a good sense of camaraderie between the two of them, the fighters, and both the political parties, but also the state apparatuses, meaning the security forces, for example, the Nepal Army, the Nepal police, these security forces. So it's kind of scratching your back and scratching my back, and kind of a deal to shield perpetrators and deny victims the justice. So the victims' call, the civil society's call for the amendment of the transitional justice law has been ignored, even after 5 years and even after the 15 years of the comprehensive peace agreement. So the process remains stalled there. I would like to bring to your notice, just today, the Speaker of the House of Parliament, the House of Representatives of Nepal, Mr. Agni Prasad Sapkota, has been traveling to your country, Spain, and he's attending the parliamentary international, the parliamentary, the Union of International, whatever, this body of the parliamentarians, as a delegate from Nepal. Why I'm bringing this here is because he is an alleged, he is implicated in a case of homicide during the conflict, and there has been a Supreme Court order against him for investigation. The political process, unfortunately, brought him into the role of the House of the Speaker of the House. So there's a case pending before the court against him for the murder of an indigenous man in Kabri, unfortunately, my own district. And he's like, there's also a arrest warrant from the police, and the police says he's like not to be found anywhere in the country. This is the worst travesty of justice anyway to be confronted. So what we have been as advocates of justice, as advocates of the accountability in the country, have been so far calling is, the government and the political forces in Nepal have been basically using these transitional justice bodies, the truth commissions and the disappearance commissions, they are there in the existence as a ploy to block justice rather than to give justice to the victims. When victims want to access to the regular criminal justice systems, the authorities, if you go to the police says, well, this is the case that falls into the jurisdiction of the TRC. So the doors are closed that way. That's where we are stalled. The commissions haven't been delivering anything. One set of commissioners just ended the 4 years mandate, and then another set of commissioners were appointed. The first set of commissioners merely collected the complaints, but they didn't act upon those complaints. So haven't been able to resolve a single case so far. The international community is not engaged. We are not engaged as civil society, and victims are not engaged. Initially, victims were engaged. Victims engaged because they give the benefit of the doubt to those commissioners. They thought, well, probably if there are good commissioners with good conscience, and if they could act upon, maybe there would be a space for us to get justice and truth and all that. But unfortunately, all those commissioners were appointed on a political basis. So it is like a consensus among the political forces as to who to be chosen. So the truth commissions, both of them have not delivered anything. They are basically, in our terms, wasting the state resources that otherwise could or should have been gone to the welfare of the victims community. It's the abuse of the taxpayers' money. It's the abuse of my money. So as civil society advocate, we would continue to urge with the government and also the political forces to first and foremost amend the law, the transitional justice law, and create a new set of commission, both commissions, Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Enforced Disappearance Commission, through a transparent and consultative process with persons who are worthy to be trusted and who can gain command and respect of the victims, and start the process anew. That's where we stand at the moment.
Well, thank you so much, Nirayan, for giving us this update on the current situation of the truth-telling process in Nepal. Let me now open the floor for the audience for questions and comments for our panelists today. You can either write them in the chat. If you are one of the participants allowed to have camera on, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we will give you the floor. Let me open the chat and see if we have already any question, or within the attendees, if you are willing to make a question, the ones that have the camera, permission to use the camera, you can go ahead also and put it on.
Anna, in
Yes,
the meantime,
Carlos.
sorry. In the meantime, sometimes it takes a few minutes for the audience to pose some questions. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank also Nirayan about your presentation. Just the last thing you said. So where you are now is wanting to restart the process anew Is that what I understood? Is that victims and civil society in Nepal and local civil society in Nepal are agreed on, let's just start this process again? Is that where you are now?
Yeah, Carlos, thank you for this question. Yeah, basically, yes. The consistent call from the victims and civil society so far has been that the law, the law underpinning the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the enforced disappearance should first and foremost be amended in line with Nepal's international human rights obligation, and of course, in line with the Supreme Court's ruling. Once that amendment happens, and then there will have to be a fresh process whereby to appoint a new set of commissioners through a transparent, process with vetting and all that. We need good commissioners who can command public respect, who can command victims' trust, not the political puppets as we have now. Yeah, basically, we would disown these commissioners, the existing commission. We don't agree and we don't engage, and yeah, basically we don't recognize them. We would want, if we ever want to proceed ahead, if the state comes with commitment to start a process of completely anew. That's I think the bottom line from the victims community as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nirayan. We have a question from the audience from Adriana Rutlin, who is based in Colombia. I think she has permission to connect through the camera, but if not, I will read her question aloud. So she says, thank you all for the presentations and your wonderfully interesting approaches to this. My question along this line: are we just doing what we have to do in response to international obligations, for instance, the TJ recipe? Is there a space for resistance to transitional justice still? How has this establishment of a transitional justice recipe and almost obligation affected our capacity to imagine transitional justice from the local? Is it like Keitele says, that we have lost our imagination and we are doing what we must? Anyone wants to answer? We have been discussing today, right, the importance and the influence of this normative essence of transitional justice, but we are also wondering what room has civil society to shape this process, to come up with alternatives, to think something new, no? As Adriana proposes, to reimagine transitional justice as it is. Is there any theme from Nepal or from Côte d'Ivoire that you would like to bring up?
Well, I think,
yeah,
Nirayan, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think Anna asked a very good question. I mean, civil society and victims have been shaping the process on their own way. There's a way to go about it from their own, side. There's state kind of doing its official process, but victims, civil society, kind of their own private initiatives have been recording the pains. They have been coming together on a number of occasions, and kind of keeping the spark alive. So the hope is, even if it is hoping against hope, that at the end of the day, justice prevails. So this narrative is not dying, it's rather becoming stronger each day as we go about. Yes, it takes long, as it's painful for the victims and for the people in the country as well. to kind of witness and endure the impunity, the ongoing impunity. Like, for example, I have a Speaker of the House who is accused of murder. I mean, it's shameful, it's humiliating, and he's traveling abroad. And I would urge Carlos and everybody there in Spain, if you could please do something about his being in a country. Like, for example, I mean, we have these principles of universal jurisdiction and all that, but I mean, as long as civil society and victims keep the spark alive, things are certain to happen, and justice will prevail. So the alternative narratives, the narratives of victims will have to be kept alive. And that's what we have been doing, particularly through our engagement with victims community, including in building their capacities to stand up and to speak out against the injustices that we have been confronting. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Mr. Janet.
Okay, I see the question of Adriana regarding the resistance to transitional justice. And I would like to say that in our context in Cote d'Ivoire, we conducted a study to explore the resistance to transitional justice here. And here we don't see the resistance, we don't conceptualize resistance like spoiling the process, but the alternative vision of transitional justice. And of course, here there are many alternative visions of transitional justice, but the focus of the process here, the official process, is on the standard of UN standard of transitional justice. And I agree with you with your statement. So the question is here, for example, even if the focus was on the UN standard, the state failed to do so, to comply with them. That's the problem. And at the same time, they don't want to promote the alternative vision of this process, as I mentioned earlier in my speech. So yes, they say, for example, that's why here we come with this conception that like it is like transitional justice here in Cote d'Ivoire is only for winners, and they don't go to the roots of the conflict and the drivers of the conflict. And it is very, how to say, it's superficial process here in Cote d'Ivoire. But there are many other visions of transitional justice. It is what I would like to say concerning Cote d'Ivoire. Thank you.
Carlos, before we wrap up, would you like to add anything else?
No, maybe just something we maybe haven't touched upon, which is the difference between capital or in Nepal, for example, Kathmandu-based organizations versus field or other organizations, NGOs at a more local level, or even victims at a local level. I think there is a big gap as well. I mean, that has been my perception. Sometimes what drives the interest of the let's say capital city based organizations sometimes is different, divergent from what maybe other more local or more local processes. I don't know if that is the case in Cote d'Ivoire, but that was my perception sometimes in Nepal. I don't know if Mira-chan would agree with that, and I don't know if Mr. Janet, or I don't know if we have even time to talk about that. But either way, it was just that reflection.
Thank you, Carlos. You have raised so many interesting points. I'm afraid we don't have enough time to go deeper to debate some of them. I would like to thank you all for participating. Carlos, Nirayan, Adu, Jane, and also Adriana for your question. And now I would like to encourage you to stay with us because we have a second panel in 10-15 minutes, starting in 10-15 minutes, where we will discuss the work of the Truth Commission in Colombia today with a representative of the Truth Commission and also a representative from civil society, which will be moderated by Silvia Planas from the International Catalan Institute for Peace. So please just remain in the same link and we will be connecting in a few minutes and start the second panel. Thank you again all for your participation and your attendance.
Thank you.
And greetings from Barcelona.
Thank you. Greetings from Abidjan.
consultative process with different in different countries to understand how, with refugees, with exiles, and with Colombians living abroad, how they wanted to participate in the Truth Commission. So this was a process the Truth Commission did with the help of the ICTJ and IOM. And in these dialogues with civil society, what the victims abroad said was they didn't want to only give their testimony or only give their statements, but that they wanted to have an active role in the Truth Commission in terms of, and this in a sense that recognize their experience, their knowledge, and how they have been building trust and networks within victims. So this is how the Truth Commission decided to work, right? Hearing this request from the Colombians abroad, from the refugees, and really taking in giving them an active role, which is it's a change in what many institutions have treated these victims, and working with them, working with their organizations for them taking statements, them taking testimonies, and this completely changes everything. This approach was also implemented in Colombia with indigenous populations, this model. So we thought the commission saw how this worked abroad, and then they did it in Colombia because there's also challenges to work with indigenous population in terms of trust, in terms of also languages, because there's lots of languages that are spoken within Colombia. So what the Truth Commission did was go to the organizations, with the indigenous organizations that work with all the communities around the country, prepare them to take the statements, prepare them to do the research, and together go and gather the statements of indigenous populations. So this helps have a more trustful process, and also one that is more respectful of their culture and their way of speaking everything. So these are the type of strategies the commission has worked with. Similar things have been done with women, in which giving them an active role within the research within the commission. And another thing that I think has been very important is that the Commission has thought that it was very important to have an ongoing dialogue with civil society. So this has been done in different spaces. One of them is the non-repetition dialogues, in which there are dialogues in different areas. For example, in different territories in which we speak with the civil society leaders of that region, with the politicians, with the businessmen, with the journalists, so with the civil society, to have a collective debate and reflection of what is going on right now, how the conflict persists right now, and how this is a result of what has happened in the past and why it is. So this is an idea to think that this is like the conflict is not only of the interest of victims and perpetrators, but us as of civil society. It's important to be involved in these discussions and to understand that it has affected us all, right? And this has also these dialogues, or another type of dialogue, but we have also been done with artists in Colombia, for example. So musicians, writers, painters from the film industry, to have different perspectives of what has happened in Colombia and different ways to also get this word around. So I think that has been very important for the Commission, to have dialogue with lots of different people, to give them an active role in not only giving their statement of what was the violence with them, but also the understanding of what has been wrong and what can be done to build peace in the future.
That's great. Thank you very much, Michelle, for this general panorama that you give us. And now you have mentioned the nodes, and I would like to ask Ana Maria, because you have participated actively in one of the nodes or groups supporting the Truth Commission that was created in Germany in order to support and to contribute to the work of the Truth Commission in exile. So I would like to ask you if you could please share with us, the role of the node, and what role did you have also inside this participation space? Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And yeah, I'm very grateful to be here, and I would like to say hello to Michelle as well. So just to complement some things that Michelle was saying, because the process that the Commission has been taking outside Colombia, it was also very important because before the exile was not really on the agenda, or the Colombian people were not really, or we as society, we were not really talking about the exile, or we were not considering this as something that happened due to the armed conflict. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the German group. So it was born in 2019, and we look to create bonds and trust with the people living in exile here in Germany. Initially, it was a group made of people with that they were related to different organizations and collectives, and they wanted to support peace building in Colombia. Nowadays, we are a group of people that some of them, they are working together with other collectives and organizations, but we are also in the node working as individuals. And what we have noticed as well, in this node here in Germany, we have doing some sort of documentation, or we have written our process during the past months. And what we have noticed is that we all share, or most of us, we share the same historical context, and we have experienced the dynamics of the armed conflict in Colombia in multiple ways. And this has led us to create this group and to participate in this group that is looking for the truth, leaving behind us some different beliefs or political ideas, to come together and to bring something that is supporting the process of the Truth Commission, and that is also helping us to look for peace. So I'm gonna tell you some of the objectives of the German node. I'm not gonna probably say all of them, but just like some of them, and I'm gonna put some examples of what we've been doing through each of these objectives. So the first one, and I think most important one in 2019 and also in 2020, was to collect testimonies that were supporting the final report of the Truth Commission. So we collected testimonies from victims and people who witnessed the armed conflict all around Germany. Then we also looked to visualize and recognize the victims of the Colombian armed conflict in Germany, and also to contribute to the construction of truth and memory. And we have done this by doing different events. Most of them were online events due to the pandemic. So at the beginning, we were having lots of face-to-face events, but then we have online events when we are talking about memory, about truth, what happened in Colombia, what is still happening in Colombia. And we also put into the spotlight why is it important to listen to the voices of people that have left the country. So we have, for instance, a podcast that is called Voices in the Exile, or in Spanish it's called Voces en el Exilio. And there we have short stories from people telling what they have perhaps lived in Colombia, but also what they have lived outside Colombia, and specifically here in Germany. And then you ask me about my specific role in the Nodo. So here in Germany, our Nodo is divided into 4 different groups: the interviewers, the psychosocial group, the coordinators, and also the communication and media group. So I'm part of the last group, the communication and media group, and the pedagogical area. So what we are doing is trying to put into the spotlight everything that is happening with the Truth Commission, everything that is happening with the victims outside Colombia, and also letting the German society know why it's important that these things can have a place in the like why is important that we are talking about it, and that the German society also they know about it. Many of the things that we are doing, like the videos, the events, the podcasts, and everything can be found in Spanish, in German, and in English.
Thank you very much for sharing us your experience and for letting us understand a little bit more how this international deployment has happened. So you have both mentioned the trust, building trust and creating bonds with people in exile. And Michelle, I would like to ask you, what kind of limitations have you found from the Truth Commission? Have you had to really engage with civil society? No, Anna has also mentioned the pandemic of COVID-19. We are talking about the lack of trust. There's also the persistence of the armed conflict in Colombia. So I would like to ask you if you could give us further detail on these limitations that you may have identified related to the engagement of civil society.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, well, yeah, definitely. I think trust has been one of the greatest challenges. I think that is one of the great consequences of a war in a country. It goes and breaks trust. It breaks relationships. And in the Colombian case, there's a lot of mistrust towards the Colombian state, right? So there's lots of institutions that have been, have had different relations with people, and there's lots of worries from the civil society to the state institutions. So for the Truth Commission to come as a state institution in lots of cases, it has been difficult. And at the same time, also within Colombians, right? There's also trust issues within Colombians. If you are from this side or this other side from the conflict, or maybe I don't know so that has been one of the greatest challenges that the Commission has faced, and definitely something that we have worked greatly towards, how to build trust within the community. And I think that the work we have done in the exile is a great example of how to reach people, how to build trust, and how to begin dialogues again between Colombians in terms of how we can, have conversations, even if we're in different sides in a way within the conflict. And I think this trust has also been it's a greater challenge right now because of what happened during the peace process negotiation, how there was a large sector of the country and politicians that were against the peace process. And right now we have a government that came from that area, that political area. So not very supportive of the peace process, although yesterday we had the celebration of the 5 years of the agreement that the president was present. But so there has been, let's say, not as clear support from the government as it was in the previous government, and that this has definitely had an effect in terms of the economical, financial resources that the Truth Commission has, how much it's been supported or given space in different areas internationally and nationally. So this has been a big challenge, definitely. And then the persistence of the conflict, as you mentioned, also definitely is a big restraint to work in different areas. People are afraid that if they will speak, they may have consequences in terms of their risk for their life or a risk for their family. Even people that are abroad and have family in Colombia are afraid to speak if maybe that will have some side of consequences for the family that is in Colombia in different areas. There's some places where it's still not safe to speak of. So there's still a lot of fear within Colombia and even abroad. People still have a lot of fear because the conflict it didn't happen 20 years ago. We're not taking a look back, but it's still ongoing in a lot of places. So it's still a risk. And definitely COVID has been another complication for the work of the Truth Commission. I think abroad it was easier to adapt to the new circumstances and have lots of things happen online. Lots of interviews happened online, lots of online dialogues. But within Colombia, there's a lot of places where there's no internet connection. You cannot have an interview with somebody that is in maybe in Putumayo or in Choco, in different regions. They won't have the same internet connection. So it's not as easy to reach them, which would have to be present and be there. So that was one of the main reasons, or the reason why the commission's mandate was extended. It was supposed to end in 2 days, the 28th of November. So we're just on the third year of our mandate, and it has been extended for till June 2022 for the presentation of the final report, and then there will be 2 months of socialization. So the idea is to have in this time and it has been ongoing for the last couple of months, but it's still to be able to reach those people that due to COVID were not able to be reached, and to complement the conversation and the research from that information. So there have been a lot of challenges, but I think the commission has also been very quick to adapt to the circumstances, to be creative and have different ways to reach people, to have different types of conversations and have different ways to engage society. We also have volunteers in different parts in Colombia, young volunteers, and outside, of course, a lot. But so that has been really like the ways to face the different challenges we have had.
Thank you, Michelle. No, I was thinking that we identified that building trust was one of the main difficult points that we had in front of us when we started this process, and all the factors that you mentioned made it more and more difficult, and obviously the COVID, not being able to be face to face with the victims and build this trust, or the persistence of the armed conflict it was a difficult context, but I think that the Commission and the civil society managed to do a really great job, and that's why I would like to talk about one of many, but successful experiences that happened in this Colombia, outside Colombia. And it's that some of the nodes or supporting groups in Europe have established an internode group that focuses its work on gender, and it connects women from different countries. And Ana Maria, you are part of this group, and I would like to ask you, what kind of work have you advanced in this gender group? And if you could just give us a little bit more on your perspective, if you feel that your work and your contributions have been integrated by the Commission.
Thank you, Silvia. I was ready to answer the other question related to trust, but yeah, I think it's very important that we are talking actually about it today, which is the 25th of November, which is the day of the elimination against elimination of violence against women. As well as I did with the German group, I'm not gonna mention all the objectives that the internodal or the internode has, but also some of them. The group was also created in 2019. There are different internodal, it's a little bit difficult to say it in English, groups, and this is one of them. And we start from knowing that the truth is not complete without the truth of women. And from this, we also want to put into the spotlight that especially it's not complete without the truth of women living in exile. So as we talked a little bit before, the exile is something that is not really too much present in Colombia when we talk about the armed conflict, and then the woman living in exile is also something that is less present when we are talking about the impacts that the armed conflict has had. So we had a first meeting in 2020 here in Berlin, where some of us we met, and then we did something that I would like to show you, which is this one. Is something where we actually wrote what is moving us as women to, sorry, to act together and to create things together. So I wish it could be in English so you can actually read it. It's unfortunately only in Spanish, but you can find it on the Truth Commission webpage, and it's very, very emotional. But from there are also different objectives that they are leading our events or our workshops. And some of them, as I said, to recognize that the impact of the armed conflict impacts different women and also the exile. And from there, we want to dig deeper into the truth of the war and its consequences, and also to dig deeper into the impact, trauma, and resistances on the exile. For us, it's very important that it's recognized that the woman live different violences in Colombia, but also after they leave Colombia. The violences or everything that happened doesn't really stay in Colombia, but after you leave Colombia, there are also other kind of violences that sometimes they are not really, or sometimes we don't really talk about it, or they are not really recognized. And these challenges, they also depend not only about if you are recognized as woman or if you recognize yourself as woman, but also related to your sexual orientation, your country of your region, the fact of being a migrant. And then we also want to promote a social dialogue between women that they recognize themselves as exile, but also the diaspora woman or a woman that they have only migrated from Colombia. Related to the question that you asked me about the contributions, I think the Commission itself in Colombia and also outside Colombia has opened lots of spaces for women to talk. And I think this is something that I personally recognize as one of the achievements from the Truth Commission, and it's that you can really see how the women have been shaping lots of things that the Truth Commission has been doing in Colombia and outside Colombia. And outside Colombia, we all have grown with the Truth Commission, supporting the Truth Commission, and the Truth Commission supporting us. And we have given from the internal or the internal, we gave one research or one report that it's in the final report as well, like, well, not all of it, but like some of these things will be taken. We don't know how much from what we have done or what we have written it's going to be taken into the consideration, because we still don't have the final report, but we can already see that this process has been very important for all the women and have given us the possibility to talk about different things that before they were silent due to different reasons.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And we have been mentioning that this is one of the first times that a Truth Commission has this mandate to collect testimonies beyond the frontiers of the country. And Michelle, I would like to ask you a little bit, how has been this process, to establish an international chapter? We have been spoken a little bit about it, but I would like you to give us this perspective from the Commission. And that would be great if you could focus a little bit on the challenges and also the lessons learned that you identify in this process that could be useful for future transitional justice contexts or future truth commissions around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, well, first, I think the first thing to say is that the fact that the Truth Commission is working abroad is a result of the work and of the exile population and the victims abroad. So they started to, as Ana Maria said, it is a group of people or a group of victims that have not been very much in the dialogues and the discussions of the conflict in Colombia. People didn't really know that there's so many Colombian refugees because of the conflict abroad, even though it's a huge population. In Colombia, people didn't know. And it was because of the incidents and the work, the advocacy the victims abroad did, that they actually went to the negotiation in Havana between FARC and the Colombian government. And they were the ones that stated that this was something that had to be researched and acknowledged. And for that reason, it was within the Truth Commission mandate that it was established that the Commission had to understand the impacts of the population abroad and the exile. So I think the fact that we are doing this work is in itself an achievement from the population abroad, in which they were able to make that themselves be noticed and taking their truth into account. So this is how it all started. As I said, afterwards we had this 6 months consultative process in which we went, I was part of that process, and we went to different countries around the world, dialoguing with people and different organizations that would be able to support these groups of victims and Colombians abroad to do the work outside. We also had a money restraint from Colombia, so we didn't have financial resources to work outside of Colombia. So we needed the support from civil society. We needed organizations and governments to support the work that we were going to do outside, and establish a volunteer network that were willing to do this work without, or even though there was some recognition given to the interviewers. So after this process, different support nodes, as the ones Ana Maria is part of in Germany, started to form in different countries. And what the Truth Commission did is that it traveled to different places. There was one in Europe, there's 2 in Europe, and in different other countries. And we did 3-day training workshop in which the people that wanted to be part of this process, especially the ones that wanted to do interviewers, would have an intensive training workshop to understand the Truth Commission, the objective, principles, ethics program, how to do an interview, what was it, how the interview of the Truth Commission is different from the interview that, for example, the unit for victims and for the reparation does. It's a different interview that a different institution does. So how is the interview for the Truth Commission? How is going to be the psychosocial support or psychosocial approach during the interview and afterwards? And we did afterwards some extra training online to how to put the testimonies on in the program. We have a cloud, the system, online system in which to put the interviews, and we create and then the notes began working. No, they began with outreach, began with pedagogy, engaging the victims, engaging different population, and inviting people to give their testimony and their statements. So in this process, we have faced, of course, a lot of challenges. It's important to say that we did have one reference before the Colombian experience, which was the Truth Commission of Liberia, that had done this experience in the United States with an NGO that was Advocates for Human Rights. So we took a lot from their experience. We actually had this NGO Advocates for Human Rights come to one of the training workshops in the United States and learn from their approach and grow from that, because what their approach was, they didn't have Liberians taking statements. They didn't have the same population taking statements. It was lawyers from different organizations, but we learned from that experience of how to reach different people. But of course, this was something that was new, because it was Colombians taking statements, it was victims taking statements, and it was a much broader scope of geographical scope, cultural, different languages. So there's 26 countries involved. So it's Europe, it's Ecuador, it's Venezuela, North America, Argentina, and in each of these places there's also a different context. There's different victims that reach different countries. There's also different organizations. There's some places in which victims are very organized and very, very active. There are some places where there are no victim organizations. There are some places where there's good relations with the consulates, and there are some places in where there are no relationships with consulates. So it was important to understand that we had to adapt to the different contexts. There isn't a way to do it exactly the same everywhere, which I think it's something new for a state institution, because state institutions usually come with like a very strict plan, and then just everybody have to adapt to it. But here we were really building the process as we were going on. The Truth Commission itself was also being created along the way. So this is a new institution. So it was created only 3 years ago. That is a very baby institution, and it's finishing its mandate. So it was a lot of creating the path as we were going, understanding what were the needs of people, how we needed to approach them, and how it was different in every context. So as we said, we faced challenges of trust. We also faced in moments lots of uncertainties that I think people felt like we didn't know for sure from the beginning how every step of the way was going to be. So there was a lot of uncertainty in a lot of moments, and that in some moments had communication difficulties. But it has been a powerful process, and I think that one of the lessons learned, or something that I'm very happy about, is that the autonomy that was in a way giving to each of the nodes to understand their context and to understand what were their capacities and their strengths was a way of also I think that there's a lot of leaderships, different leaderships in different countries that were strengthened because of this process, that people were empowered by the fact that they were creating the process as well. They were creating the strategy, the outreach strategies. They were taking statements. They were having dialogues with different institutions. So it was not only like a top to bottom approach, but it was also, there was lots of things that also emerged from the notes, from the victims, in terms of what was needed, how to reach it, how to do it. So it was very much of a dialogue between the commission and the notes to understand how the process was needed to be done. We did face, there's also, I think, a challenge in terms of the social support. What we recognize definitely is that there's lots of trauma from the conflict still present in the victims. Lots of victims have not been able to have psychosocial support, and lots of people were requesting it from the Truth Commission, and it was difficult because of it was not, it's not in the Truth Commission mandate to give the psychosocial support, but and it is beyond our capacities, but it's still latent. We see it's still a need. So there was lots of like strategies that came in the process. There's the psychosocial internode. I don't know how to say in English. So with the psychology department in the Truth Commission in Colombia, different strategies were built with different psychologists that were part of these nodes, and thinking of strategies to accompany them. But of course, we understand that the need is bigger than what we were able to provide right now, and that is something that is going to be, it's still something that it has to be covered by the state. So I think there's lots of lessons learned from this process. I think definitely like civil society engagement is important. I think lots of people feel that they are really part of the Truth Commission's process, and not only they were a research object. And this makes that the truth is really shared. Lots of people are part of this truth, and lots of people are creating this truth. And I know Ana Maria says you still don't know how the report is going to be, the final version. We have already shared with some of the notes, some of the findings, but what you're going to see is definitely it's a collective result from the testimony, from the statements, from the conversations, from the reports. It's really a collective construction what the report is going to be. So I think that's going to be very different.
That's great. Thank you very much. You have mentioned something that I would like to just talk a little bit more deeper later. That's this double role of some interviewers that were taking testimonies to victims, but they were also victims at the same time. So I would just like to maybe keep this idea just for the next part. And Ana Maria, now we have listened this kind of evaluation. It's not an evaluation, but the balance that the commission does from how has this process go and went. And I would like to ask you from your experience and as part of the civil society, from this volunteer network that Michelle was saying, that would be great if you could please share with us some of the how do you view, how do you evaluate this experience of truth telling from abroad? What problems have you maybe encountered, or if there are any lessons learned that you would like to share with us from this perspective from the civil society? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Michelle. And I think Michelle has also said some stuff that I think were also happening in the process of collecting testimonies outside Colombia. And while you were talking, Michelle, I was also identifying our process in the things that you were saying, even if they happen in Colombia, and even when they are not the same, many of the things were very similar. And I think the trust is a really, really big issue, and it was a really big issue at the beginning, and especially because the people, some of them, they didn't know what the Truth Commission was. So to start talking about, we are collecting testimonies, or there is this Truth Commission in Colombia, and now we are this group here in Germany, and we want to listen to our stories, and why is it important to listen to our stories, or what is important to talk about what happened to us. They were sometimes saying, okay, but what is the Truth Commission? When we were also explaining what was the Truth Commission, sometimes they didn't know what kind of entity it was. And from the experience, the Colombian society, they don't really trust the state entities or the government entities. So we also had to explain what the Truth Commission was, what was the mandate of the Truth Commission, and to make them understand how the information was going to be handled. And then after the pandemic came, and this was also a very difficult time for all of us. And even when the Truth Commission also opened space to collect interviews or to give the testimonies through the platform that Michelle mentioned, it was not a very easy process, because the people, they didn't really want to talk in this way. And I personally, I understand it, because it's different if you have lived different things, or even when you want to talk to someone, it's different to do it in front of someone that you can also feel that the person is creating some empathy with you, than talking to someone that is on the other side of the screen. But at the end of the day, we survived the pandemic, and we were able to create different ways in which we could let the people understand, and we could create some trust with the people that they wanted to give their testimonies. Here in Germany, specifically, we created, or we did lots of webinars and workshops with the interviewers, and also with the psychosocial team, because Michelle was mentioning this before, but here in Germany, we have, well, so we had it before, we still have it, but the psychosocial team, and they were along the whole way. So when the Colombians, or where the people first wanted to, or where they decided that they wanted to speak, so before they were meeting with the psychosocial group, not all of them, some of them, through the whole process, and then afterwards. And then we also did some workshops for the people who gave their testimonies, or also together with the people that they wanted, or they were still unsure, giving their testimonies, so that they were meeting the people that they have already speaking. And I think this was also a very important process, especially through the pandemic, when we were giving the testimonies online, because on the webinars, they had the chance to do something like what we are doing today now, by Zoom, meeting the people, meeting the interviewers, and really getting to know, okay, this is a person who will listen to my story. And you could really get to know them beforehand. And this was very important. We had also some interviews that they were participated in the Nodo in Ecuador. So this also helped us a lot here in Germany, that we had a very big group of interviewers, that they had some different experiences from Ecuador, and also the ones here already in Germany. So they came together, and they had really, really good ideas how to approach the people. So this has helped us a lot with the process here, with the testimonies. And well, I'm not sure. I mean, I could also say the things related to what from my experience, like what I would like to share. It's perhaps not really only related to the interviews or to the testimonies, but also like the whole process itself of supporting the Truth Commission, or being part of this group here in Germany. And as Michelle also mentioned, we've learned some things along the way that probably we could have done before. We did it too late, I don't know, but it's how it happens. For instance, the dialogue and the importance of listening. So recently we started creating this year dialogue spaces, and we realized that this was also helping a lot of people. It's very small, so they are by Zoom. It's very small, only 15 people, and we talk about different topics. But then we did it after the national strike in Colombia to talk about our emotions as Colombians living outside Colombia, how we were feeling about it. But we realized that it's very important to listen, and this is something that is missing a lot in Colombia. We haven't learned yet how to listen and how to dialogue without addressing our beliefs and without addressing our ideas, and that they won't become violent. And we really need to learn how to listen. Also, these processes of testimonies, workshops, and webinar, the workshops, especially with the psychosocial team, they have shown us that we all carry different luggage and that we have all different stories, but that it's very important that we recognize ourselves. And this has also helped us to understand that we have lived sometimes something similar, sometimes something different, but that this has to be recognized. And sometimes some people are more comfortable talking than others, but in these spaces, you also feel that there is a change along the way, and that is helping people to cope with some situations, even if they remain silent. And the last thing that I think Michelle also already mentioned it, but it was the chance to support something that was happening in Colombia, outside Colombia. And I think for many of us, it's also the returning to Colombia, being outside Colombia. And I think for some people was again the possibility to start creating these peace building processes when they left it a long time ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I would like to ask you if you could just explain a little bit more, because the German group was one of the most creative, to say it somehow. I know that you did a lot of workshops using artistic or different methodologies, to just improve this psychosocial support that Michelle and you were mentioning. So I don't know if maybe you could just give us a few examples of what kind of workshops did you do with these victims to build trust and to create this bond, and help them to deal with their stories and give them their testimonies.
Yeah, so the workshops were held in 2020 and also in 2021 in Berlin and in some other cities like Hamburg, Frankfurt, Bonn, and some others I don't remember at the moment. And there are 3 different workshops, and they all are related to art. So psychosocial related to art. I'm going to mention the 3 of them very quickly. So the first one is how to recover memory through theater. So how our memory passed through our body and how we can reflect our memory and our experiences through our body. And this was held by one of our colleagues that she works with theater. The other one was a writing process. So it was writing our experiences, writing our collective memory, and writing small narratives of us and also from the group. And the third one is weaving or knitting. This is an activity that it's also focusing on collecting memory and also healing. So for instance, I would like to show you, I'm not like the best one doing this, but I would like to show you, this was actually my first one. And in Spanish, it says dejar ir, which is let go. And it has a meaningful thing behind and everything, but it's also a ritual of you sit together, you talk about your experiences, you talk about the connections that you have with Colombia, with the different territories in Colombia, and then you start knitting your experience, and then you start knitting your memory. But through the process of knitting, you're also constructing a new memory because you are knitting with the people that are around you in this workshop. So this has been very, very interesting. And as I say, in 2020, we did it with people that they were giving the testimony, that they gave the testimony and that they wanted to give the testimony. So together, both of them. And also we did one in Hanover, where we put together these 3 workshops with people that they are at the moment here looking for asylum. So this was also a very important thing. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much, and thank you also for sharing us your work. That looks amazing. And I don't know, just a kindly reminder that you have the Q&A, just in case that you just want to write them some comments or any ideas or questions that you have in your mind. So just before giving the floor to our audience, I would like to ask you, Michelle, if you could maybe just explain us a little bit more about what we were mentioning, you know, these interviewers that were responsible for gathering testimonies from victims, but at the same time they were also victims themselves. I think that that's one of the main innovations that the Colombian Truth Commission has, and I think that maybe it would be great if you could just share us a little bit more of how did you plan it and how do you evaluate that, did it go, and maybe just share us a little bit more about this experience.
Thank you, Sylvia. So as I said, this was something that the Truth Commission decided to implement as a request from the victims, that they wanted to have this role to be taking statements, to be part of the research. So we understood from the beginning that it was going to be a challenge, but that it was also a recognition within itself. So it was a way first to break a lot of the stigmas that there has been around victims abroad. So what happens in Colombia is that there's a lot of suspicion in a way about who left. So like if you left, it's because you did something wrong, and now you're running away from Colombia, and that's a big imaginary that is in Colombia. So for the Truth Commission to say, we trust you, we know we are victims. And I remember from one of the first events I was in Colombia, and it was a group of women from abroad, La Colectiva de Mujeres. They came to the Truth Commission and they said, what we need is for you to believe us, right? Because this is something that victims have to face a lot. So they go to the migration agents and prove your story, you know, and you have to bring the proofs of the violence that you lived. And you go to the unit victims of, and they have to everywhere people have to really prove that they are really victims, and they are left with the sensation that there's no trust in their story. So the Truth Commission decided to change that and to really trust victims and understand, and in a recognition of their pain, and also in a recognition of the work they had done. And so in itself, I think it's a huge achievement of the commission to have victims be part of this process. And it was a way for a lot of people, as Ana Maria said, that when they left Colombia, they left the possibility of working for Colombia, of having this leadership, of having this peace building. And this gave them an opportunity to again have that role that for a long time was part of their identity, and that they lost because of the exile, because they left. And now somebody that was a leader here in Colombia, or was a human rights advocate, or who was a journalist, they go outside of Colombia and they can't be that same person. They sometimes have to go to a different job, sometimes in, domestic care, in, whatever job they can find. And that is something that is very difficult for, professionals, people that had, an important social recognition here in Colombia. They go outside and they lose all of this because of their violence. So I think that was also an opportunity to give a lot of victims that were leaders, that were working actively for Colombia, and that they felt like they lost that which gave in a way, a sense, meaning to their life. So I think that was very important. Of course, there is also a difficulty in this in terms of hearing people's story also faces you again with your personal trauma that in lots of cases has not been dealt with. And within, the victims and the exile population abroad, there's also a huge, we cannot generalize everybody's experience, because there's a lot of people there's people that have left 30 years ago from the country. There's people that left 2 years ago or last year. So there's different relationships everybody has with what happened in Colombia. So for some people, this was experienced hearing other people. It was something that relived lots of their own story. So it was difficult in a way, and there was more psychosocial support needed in these cases. In some places, in other times, this was not so close, and I think it was also for a lot of people that have spoken about this. It was important because they got to hear other people's stories of violence that were maybe very different from theirs, and from which, in Colombia we have these imaginaries of what types of victims there are, and what types of responsibles went into each type of victim. And there's a lot of, like, I don't know, animosity and suspicion between the victims. So to hear other people's story was also very important for a lot of people to understand that your pain, even though it's completely different to what I lived, I can understand it, I can empathize with it, and I can, we can start having a different type of conversation. So I think this was very important. I'm sure Ana Maria also might have thoughts on this, and Sylvia also, you're very much part of this process and you've seen it. So I don't know how you guys saw it as well.
Yeah. So Ana Maria, if you want to take the floor, you can also do your part.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that Michelle is saying, and I think it is exactly what you were saying. And I stopped to think about what you were saying with these victims' role, or how we see, okay, what happened to you, what happened to me. And I think this process also gave us the chance to, as I mentioned it before, to understand that we all have sometimes stories that are connected to the armed conflict. And what you were saying also made me think about the book from Javier de Soucy, that I don't remember the name at the moment.
Transparentes.
Transparentes, because what's very...
It's translated to English, it's going to come out soon. It's going to be called Invisibles.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. And I think what you can see there is also that not all of them, they have lived the same stories, and even some of them they're saying, but I don't consider myself living in the exile. Why do you want to interview me? I don't have anything to say. But then also like this chance of recognition, and that you have something to say, that your voice was counting. This was also something very important, that we all as Colombians in different ways, and I'm not gonna put some like low levels of pain in different levels of pain, but also the idea of like the Colombian society has been affected with the armed conflict, and this is what we were trying to show through this whole process of collecting testimonies, but also the whole process that we are doing right now with recognition and looking for the truth. And I think specifically with the victims working here in Germany or in the Nodo, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Nodo, not everybody recognize themselves as victims or as exiled people. Some of them they do. In the interviewers group as well, not everybody recognize themselves as victims. Some of them they also do. But as Michelle said, I think what it was important between this process of speaking and listening was a possibility to creating fabric between what happened to the person telling the story and what happened with the person who was listening to story. And you can really not only recognize yourself in other stories, but also give the recognition that each story deserves. So I think this has been a very, very important process. And as Michelle says, is also an opportunity to heal from some of them. Listening to other stories was an opportunity to heal their own story. To tell the story is also a chance to heal. It's for some of them the first time that they were actually feeling that someone wanted to listen to what they lived in Colombia, or the challenges that they had to live after leaving the country. So it's a whole healing process, and the whole process of the Truth Commission outside Colombia, I think, is a process where it shows that through resiliences and coping with the pain, we have been able as victims to create these peace building processes.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And now I can see that we have a question from Claudia Saba. And she says, could either of the speakers say something about the chance of financial reparations? What kind of reparations are expected to be made, and what is the timeline for that? To what extent are victims seeking financial reparations? I don't know if maybe, Michelle, you could just give us a little bit point of view here from the Commission, and maybe you want to have something to say about the victims seeking financial reparations.
So the reparations in Colombia are in charge of the unit for victims. I don't know how to do exact translation to English, but so there's a special entity that's in charge of reparations. This has been a big challenge in Colombia. Right now, with the work abroad, there has been a very, I think, an active role from the institution to have a registration process of the victims that are abroad. And I think it's already over 25,000 or 30,000 victims from abroad that have been registered in the reparations process. With population in exile, there's an extra challenge that is that within the human rights violations that are stated within the law, exile or the need for refuge outside of Colombia has not been clearly stated as a human rights violation. So that there's an internal forced displacement as one of the violations, and there's threats and other, but the exile and transnational forced displacement is not officially recognized. So that has been a very big challenge in terms of getting victims abroad proper reparation. And I think it's around the 19% of the requests to be included within the registration system have been denied from victims abroad, because we have this challenge in terms of exile being officially recognized by the state, which is one of the interests of the Truth Commission to be able to achieve afterwards, or one of the important recommendations we have to give that will be able to give a more effective recognition of the population that is abroad. Right now, the unit of victims has a term that's called victims abroad. It's how they understand it, but it's an understanding that there are some victims that left the country. And so it's like we're almost speaking about the same thing, but not really, because the transnational displacement is not really recognized. So some people feel that that's the only human rights violation they had. And since it's not recognized by the units, they don't have a way of saying it. So that's a difficulty we have. And then after the registration process comes the financial reparation, which is it has been a challenge for the Colombian government so far, in terms of having the resources designated specifically for this task. Fortunately, the timeline of the reparations law has been extended. So this gives the opportunity to the process to have more time to be done. But we have the challenge more of I think a political commitment of resources really being delegated for this job.
Thank you. I don't know, Ivana, you would like to add anything else?
Just something very, very short, and maybe it's just related to the last question that she asked. And I think beyond this economical reparation, I think it's also important the recognition itself. And I think what's more important, and probably I'm not going to generalize, but for some of the victims, it's also the chance of listening, that someone is listening to your story, what really matters. And also for some victims, and I'm not now talking about the process outside Colombia, but in general, the whole process and armed conflict in Colombia, to know the truth. Sometimes you don't really know what happened to your family. Sometimes you don't really know what happened to your friends, to your colleagues. And I think what's very important for them is that someone is telling you what happened, why it happened, and that it's also someone there perhaps telling you, I'm sorry, this happened, and this is also the way of reaching the not repetition. That is, I think, what we are looking for in the Truth Commission and also outside in the NGOs, that through this whole recognition process, we aim to what we are looking is that the things that have happened to many of the people in the society, they won't happen again.
Thank you, and really important, this transformative perspective of all the work that has been doing the Commission and also the civil society around the Commission. I can see that there are two people from the audience who want to intervene. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Juliana and then to Adriana. So Juliana, I don't know if you, okay, I can see you.
Hello, good morning to everyone, and thanks so much for the invitation to participate in this seminar. I am Juliana Gonzalez. I am a researcher at Gießen University in Germany and also at Instituto Capaz. And thanks so much, Michelle and Ana Maria, for sharing your experience. I'd like to ask two questions, if that's okay. So the first one has to do with what you were sharing about victims and organizations participating in novel ways at the Truth Commission, especially at the international nodes. So I wanted to ask you if this has included taking part also in the analysis of the information that has been collected, or making decisions on which theses or narratives are assigned more weight or deepened into, and which are not, as I consider these are decisive aspects of the knowledge production process, where also power imbalances may be involved. And in that sense, what challenges do you see in allowing for more influential participation of civil society? And the second question I wanted to ask is, of course, we know, and you also explained, that differential approaches are facilitating the participation of victims and organizations at the Truth Commissions, and they do this according to categories such as gender, ethnicity, course of life, and this is also like a novel aspect of the Colombian process. So I wanted to ask you if there have been any strategies from what you know to facilitate the participation of those who are at the intersection of these categories, and who in that sense face multiple power imbalances to take place in the process. I'm thinking, for instance, about indigenous or Afro-descendant women and LGBTIQ people, and if maybe you can discuss and share some lessons from these strategies and efforts. Thanks so much.
If you want, I can answer the first question. Thank you, Juliana, for your questions. So definitely having a participative knowledge building, I don't know, a research process is challenging, because in Colombia, the researchers that we work in exile, we're mainly, well, it's like a 5 group researchers, and then abroad it's a huge scope. So we have 2,000 statements taken, and we have around 200 interviewers plus different. So what the strategy that we decided to have, well, first we have permanent dialogues with the interviewers and the support notes in different places. But what we did is that the research group in Colombia systemized the interviews, and with the reports, with different resources, we received a lot of reports from the victims, from nodes, from internodes, from different organizations which were also part of the research process. And then we did discussions with the preliminary findings with the different groups. So we presented the findings with the nodes. We presented where the research was at, and we opened the discussion to understand what they felt was missing, what they didn't agree, or what was good of what was right where we were doing. We had the one about gender, with specific about the gender subject, a short time ago, maybe like a couple of months ago, when the group was together in Sweden. So this was what we did. So we did it in different at different moments. I'm in charge with the impacts of exile. So we began with that part, and we began with the groups. This was done last year in 2020, discussing the impact, specifically the impacts of exile, with different groups of interviewers and victims around. So we did them virtually, discussing the findings in depth and having a dialogue around that. And then we did at the beginning of this year a general one, or several groups. So we had groups by region. We did this in Europe, we did this in Canada, in the United States, in Central America, and in South America, presenting the findings and having a discussion about this. And then we did them on specific subjects. So for example, the ethnical findings, how they were, so there is a large ethnical population that is abroad, and that they gave their testimonies, both indigenous and Afro-Colombians. And there are specific groups, like nodes in different parts. There's a greater concentration of people. For example, there's a huge concentration of African Colombians in Chile, in a place called I just forgot.
Antofagasta.
Antofagasta. And so we had a group of researchers there that work with them closely. There's a ethnic group in Canada, and there's an ethnic group in Europe. So we discussed the findings as well with them, and we did specific group interviews to go deeper within those findings. And we did the same with gender. So that is how we worked.
I don't know, Ana Maria, if you would like to add something.
Not related to the first question, but maybe to the second one. And it's just like something very small, but like, well, the internodes, they are also, what they are trying to do is also put into spotlight like this kind of specific categories that you mentioned. So for instance, in the gender group, we are not also talking about women, but then we also want to talk about what's happening specifically with diverse women living in exile. And this is something that we really talk about, and it was very important in the last event that we had in like a month ago, a little bit longer than a month ago, with this internode. And it's also to put into presence, into the spotlight, that is not only cis women, the ones that are here in this group, or there are not only women and that's it, but there are also women that they are that they have different intersectionality categories. Also, there are different internodes groups, and here in Germany, we have tried to shape our events and our podcast episodes and everything, focusing our work through these different categories. But we also recognize, as Michelle said, that it's not something that is very easy, and we also recognize that it's not something that we can say, yeah, we have done it. It's not very easy, but we are really trying to change this, and also to make people feel more comfortable to come and participate with us. The next year we are also going to have like some episodes in our podcast that, for instance, focusing especially on gender, the second generation, that we haven't talked a little bit too much on today about it, about the second generation, and also ethnicity, but especially so that the people feel that why it's important that they also, if they gave the testimony, they can stay in the node and work with us along the way.
Thank you both, and I think that's something really interesting. And I'm just adding a little bit of my experience in here. And it has been the process itself with this autonomy that Michelle was saying that has been shaping the different spaces of participation. No, and we can see that the gender group appeared because it was a necessity and it was a claim among the different nodes, but it happened the same with the group of families of victims of enforced disappearance, or for example, some of the interviewers identified several cases of Afro and Indigenous people in exile, and they also created these own groups. So I think it's kind of the power of this process is that it has been shaping itself according to its context and the different demands. And now we have 9 minutes before we have to end this panel, and we have Adriana that would like to intervene. So welcome, Adriana.
Hello, thank you for your presentations. I learned a lot in this session, and I'm gonna try to keep it brief, okay? But these are thoughts that are forming. So let me see if I can sort of get round to the point really quickly. What do you think, because we heard a lot about the report and we heard a lot about how the report is being put together, how testimonies are being collected, how testimonies are being analyzed. My interest has always been recommendations. So what do you think is the impact that families and individuals living in exile will have over these recommendations, and whether you think there will be dedicated recommendations for these victims? As you were saying, they are not really fully recognized in the current legislation. So I'm wondering whether the recommendations have a capacity to fill that gap that is there currently. And the other thing that I am wondering about is, I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit provocative, so hold on to your hats. Is a little bit this precarization that is happening in transitional justice, and precarization of civil servants, of managers, of administrators. The nodes function largely with volunteers. And as we went through the pandemic, we all suffered different consequences and effects of the pandemic, not just, the spectacular violence of the conflict that we had to hear about every day in our interviews. So I'm wondering whether you could speak a little bit to this precarization as you felt it, as perhaps, I don't know, maybe it wasn't like that as you were affected by the pandemic yourself, and you still had to carry out this extremely difficult work, whether there are perhaps psychosocial support that is dedicated for the people that were working with this. I don't know, just putting it out there. So thank you so much for your thoughts. I've been writing intensely and I've been learning a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So Michelle?
Yeah, well, in terms of the recommendations, yes, there are going to be specific recommendations for the exile findings. They're going to be specific in their chapter, and there's going to be a specific chapter within the the final report that is about recommendations. What impact that will have in the life of exiles is something that is, I think, outside of the hands of the Truth Commission, right? So our job is to create this committee that will do the follow-up to the recommendations. So I think there's going to be a lot of support needed in terms of that follow-up to the recommendations the Truth Commission does, in terms of people, having I don't know the word, like I don't know, but requesting the next government to really take into consideration this, to have funds put into this, and to see how really these recommendations are going to be implemented, because right now there's no way to make them happen. They're not mandatory, right? So that's also there. I think that's going to be a task for civil society as well, in terms of how to advocate for those recommendations to be implemented. In terms of the second question, yeah, of course, like if there's definitely need to be like an autocritical moment in terms of how everybody's situation was. I think definitely within the Truth Commission, I would have wanted more psychosocial support. I think, as I said, it goes beyond the Truth Commission's capacity. There is, and here we're dealing with very profound, trauma that has been for years and years of conflict. So it's something that it's going to take time. I think that definitely within the notes, there's a great social support need. I'm very grateful for the strategies that were, as I said, that came out of the same notes. And I think that something that is important that of the work that came from abroad is the network that was created. So as Ana Maria said, how the weaving of different people that have felt very lonely experiences, and maybe in different process within COVID makes this loneliness feel a lot sometimes greater and a lot of times. But I think now there is a network you can reach to. There is a network that has lived through similar things, and I think that what can be very helpful going forward are support groups. And I think this is like what nodes in a way were. There were support groups at different levels. Of course, there's a lot that can be strengthened in that sense, but I think that this is something that could be a lesson going forward, is that we need a lot more of support groups of people with similar experience talking to each other, and just knowing that there's somebody out there else that has lived through what I have lived, and if I speak can understand. And I think that's something that is going to be left by the Truth Commission.
Ana Maria, you'd like to add anything else just before we close it?
Yeah, I mean, you can tell me how many minutes I have.
1 minute.
Okay. I mean, no, just to be very, very quick, I think many people have been asking what's going to happen now after the Truth Commission. And I think this was also a very big question after the recognition event in 2020. And I think what is important to see is that we really need to keep working with the collectives that have been already created. And what you can also see, especially here in Germany, is that there are many people that they have realized through the things that we have doing in 2021, that they now feel that they want to talk, or they want to get into contact with what we are doing. And I think this is something very special, because now we are saying that this is something that we cannot end after once the Truth Commission is done, or once the mandate is done, but that it has to continue. And then what I wanted to mention with your next question, I'm just like trying to speak very fast, but what I wanted to mention with your other question is that not all the nodes, they had the same possibilities, especially because of the reasons that you're giving. And here in Germany, we had the support of CAPAS, and that's why we counted with the psychosocial group. That's why we have been able to create different activities, and we have been able to reach different scenarios. So it's something that we are very grateful for, because it has opened us to do many, many things, but not all the groups around the world created by the Truth Commission or supporting the Truth Commission, they have counted with the same possibilities.
Thank you both. I will just add one small thing to that, and it's because it has been a challenge for the whole process to get resources from international cooperation to work with the diasporas in Europe or in America. No? So it's some kind of work that we need still to be, it has to be done. In Germany, in Switzerland, in Catalonia, in Sweden, in some countries we managed to get these resources, but there's still a logic inside the international cooperation that sees that their resources have to be, invested in the countries where the conflict is, and not where the hosting countries of the people in exile. And sorry, but I'm also really fast because now it's time to just finish our panel. So I would just like to thank again to Michelle and to Ana Maria for her amazing work and for sharing their experiences with us today. Thank you to Global Codes and its team for these interesting and provocative discussions today. And thank you to everyone who has attended the panel. It has been a pleasure to be today with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Thank you very much, everyone. Just before we finish this interesting seminar, just to thank you all really for your participation. I think, and I speak on behalf of everyone, Ana Isabel, Albert, Carlos, that this has been a very amazing and outstanding seminar, and we would like to thank everyone. I think all the speakers have provided very interesting insights that will be extremely helpful to continue our research on knowledge production in different processes. So thanks very much. Let me just brief three main ideas that maybe can be drawn from the three context case studies that we have been analyzing. I think that on the Nepali case, I think one of the things that we have been discussing in this seminar is the difficulties sometimes to combine truth and justice, and to what extent is also difficult, and as we observe in this process, the big collusion between amnesties and prosecutions, and how all these particular tensions create a lot of problems to the process itself. I think from both Nepal and Cote d'Ivoire, we realize also how instrumental TRCs and transitional justice processes themselves can be, or to serve most of the time sometimes political goals or political aspirations. And I think as some of the speakers were highlighting, knowledge production sometimes is kidnapped on the sake of the winners of the process. And I think with the Colombian case, I don't know if you all had this impression, but I had very optimistic insights with the Colombian case by, of course, acknowledging all the difficulties that the process is, of course, witnessing and facing, but that somehow the Colombian case, specifically with the case of the exiles and the experience of the people in the exile, show us that well, there is room for hope in this sense, and for making DRCs and transitional justice processes revulsive like processes. So I think that all in all, this has been a very fascinating seminar, and we would like to thank everyone, Silvia Planas, Christian Herbolzheimer from the ICIP, also the ICIP itself for financing and helping us with this research that we have been conducting in the last months. We would also like to thank very much to Adu Jane, Michelle Harp, and Ana Maria Linares, and for their very interesting insights and expositions, and of course to all the participants that have been following this seminar. We all hope that we will be able to come up with definitive findings and results from this research project, and we hope that we will have more possibilities of discussing and coming along with different insights and speakers to continue reflecting and thinking about truth and reconciliation processes. Thank you very much. I think that has been everything.